week is Azoy. I mean, in Eretz Yisrael, I mean, we're ahead of the Toshvei Chutz La'aretz. I mean, not only 7 hours ahead, but an entire week ahead, because we're going to be laning this Shabbos Parshas Ba'aloisecha, and in Chutz La'aretz they'll be laning Parshas Naso. There is a connection between these two Parshas, as we shall see. But before we get there, I just want to discuss something about Naso. Naso is always read. The Shabbos, almost always read. The Shabbos immediately after Shavuos. And we know the Shloah Kodesh says that the Gilgul HaMoyadim, that they happen during particular Parshias that are read in the Seder of Kriyas HaTorah, is Hakol Miyad Hashem, his skill. There's a reason for why the Moyadim fall out during certain Parshas. So there must be a message in Parshas Naso that's relevant to the post Matan Torah time, to Kabbalah Satorah. So what is that? You know, Parshas Naso, we all know, is the longest of all Parshas, 176 psukim, and almost half the psukim in Parshas Naso deal with the karbonos of the Nesiim that they brought immediately after Hakamas HaMishkan. In other words, the Yemei HaMiluim were over on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and from Rosh Chodesh Nisan until Yud Beis Nisan, the 12 Shvatim brought their karbonos. And in spite of the fact that they all brought exactly the same amount and the same type of carbon, the same nedava, nevertheless the Torah elaborates and repeats by each and every one of the Nesiim, Nachshon ben Aminadav and Esano ben Tzur, and so on, exactly what they brought. We know that the Torah b'derech klal talks lashon ktsara. The Gemara says in the beginning of Psachim that even at the expense of the lashon not being a lashon nekiah, if it's nefishi milei, if it takes more words to use a lashon nekiah, the Torah uses the lashon ktsara b'derech klal. So obviously, we need to understand why the Torah repeats over and over again what the Nesiim brought. The Torah could have just said that all the 12 Nesiim brought these karbonos, and yeah. So you know, the emes, it's the ganze Zach is the Chetvar Pella if you think about it, because these karbonos were in a dove. Chazal say Neso'om libam lehisnadev. It was out of the generosity of their heart, their spirit, they decided to bring this nedava. So how did it happen that they all had the want to bring exactly the same nedava, the same kafachas maleik teres, the same parechot, ayelechot? I mean, how did that happen? How did that happen? You know, the Midrash Rabbah says, V'karbonoi. It says by each one of the Nesim, Karbonoi. So Zog the Midrash Rabbah, Ma ro'u hanesim lahakriv karbonois be'inyan hazeh. Rabbonon amrin, afal pishe karbon shoveh hekrivu kulam. Even though they brought the same carbon. Al dvarim gdoilim hekrivu. So it happened to be that they all brought the same thing, but it wasn't for the same reason. Each one had a different kavanah. As the Ramban says, Kilakol echad mihanesim ola b'machshove lohavi chanuka lamizbeach ve shetiye bezeh hashiur aval nachshoin choshav b'shiur hazeh tam echad v'zulosoi. So each and every one of the Nesim had a different reason for doing the same thing. So how did that really happen? That they all thought of doing the same thing? It could be they were. I mean, we don't know. Could be they were tuned into some frequency where they connected with the fact that the nedava should be this number and this type. But nevertheless, each one experienced this nedava in his own unique way. What do I mean to say? That you don't have to do different to be different. The message after Kabbalah Torah is because the Torah is the Mishpat Echad Lager V'lo Ezrach. It's one size fits all l'chorah. We all have the same Tov Reish Yud Gimel mitzvahs. But we know that being human is all about individuality. We know that ha'adam nivra yechidi. We know that by the Adam, there's no laminoi like by other species. The Adam is a yechidi nivra. Every individual is an olam mole. So how is it that the Torah gives you a one-size-fits-all Tov Reish Yud Gimel mitzvahs? It must be that we can all do the same thing and be different. Because we our attitude, our experience, just like we say, Bemis, that we say that Chayiv kol Adam loymar b'shvili nivra ha'olam. So how's that possible? I mean, if the olam was nivra b'shvili, it wasn't nivra b'shvilcha. So how are you saying that it was nivra b'shvili? It must be that my olam and your olam is not the same olam, because since every individual is unique, so we each and every one of us experiences the olam in his way. So the entire olam exists for me in one way and for you in another way, and it's my world is bishvili and your world you say is bishvili. In any case, Torah, in spite of the fact that we all do the same mitzvahs, we have to develop a personal, individual connection. That's the message. All the Nesiim, they brought exactly the same korban. But Nesanel ben Tzur's korban and Nachshon ben Aminadav's korban is not the same korban. The Torah repeats all the details over and over again because it wasn't repetitious. It wasn't that the second Nasi repeated what the first Nasi did. He did it because he did it, and he did it because he did it. And the same thing is true in every person. I mean, every day, we daven 3 times a day. No. Is it repetitious? It shouldn't be repetitious. We should have the ability to say those same words with a different gefühl, with a different experience, with a different connection, with a different meaning every time we do it. Just like the one Nasi brought, another Nasi brought, and another Nasi brought, and each one had his own experience. Huadin, the same person could do the same thing over and over again, and every time it should be fresh and new and different. Okay, so, the connection between Baha'al Yisrael and Naso really is through the Korbanos HaNesiim, as the first Rashi says in Parshas Baha'al Yisrael, that Loma Nismecha Parshas HaMenorah LeParshas HaNesiim Lefi Shekshero HaHaron Chanukas HaNesiim Cholsha Oz Daitoi Shaloi Hoya Imoyem Bechanuka Loihu V'loi Shivtoi. When Aaron saw the Chanukas HaNesiim, so he and his Shevet Levi, they weren't part of this. Only 12 Shvatim did it. They weren't part of it. And therefore he had Chalishus Hadas. He was dispirited. He felt bad. He was pained. Hayatochen Shaloi Hoya Imohem Bechanuka Loihu V'loi Shiftei. Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chayecha Sholcho G'dola Mishalahen. I promise you, so to speak, that what you're going to be doing is greater than what they're doing. Sha'ato madlik umetiv es haneris. No. So the emphasis that this Rashi needs to be understood in Pashup Pshat, because Avada, we only ask the question of Loma Nismecha when the order of things in the Torah are not the chronological order of events. or it's not the way things were said. They're written not in the order that they were said. So that makes us ask, so why is it out of place? If the Parshas HaMenorah was said after the Parshas HaNesim, we wouldn't have a question of Lama Nismacha. So what's the question of Lama Nismacha? It must be that the Parsha of the Menorah was said immediately after the Nesiim brought their korbanos, because in Rashi's answer, what does Rashi say? That the reason is because the reason for the Nismacha is because when Aaron saw the Chanukas HaNesiim, he felt bad, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, you're going to be Mavlik the Menorah. So he did tell it to him after the Parshas HaNesiim. So what's the question, Lama Nismacha? It's Nismacha because that's the chronological order of events. That's when it was said. So it would maybe seem that over here, the question of Lama Nismacha is really not the same as usually the question is, but over here we're really asking, why was it said now? But we don't understand what's the question. I mean, why it was said now? Because it's the time to be said. I mean, after the Nesiim brought their karbonis and we're starting to do the avodah in the Mishkan, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Aaron that every day he should light the menorah. Where else should it be said? So what's the question? The question is why it's said now? It's not a question. If it was said now, so what's the question? Lama Nismacha. It's written where it was said. So Dafman the Chavada learning that the question of Lama Nismacha is like always. Why is it written over here? Because it's out of place. Why is it out of place? Because the Chanukas HaNesiim began on Rosh Chodesh Nisan and ended on Yud Beis Nisan. That was the Chanukas HaMizbeach that the Nesiim did. But when was the Parsha of the Menorah said? It had to be said already at least on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Because as soon as the Mishkan, after the Yemei HaMiluim, as soon as the Mishkan started functioning, B'Yom Hakim Moshe, there has to be a menorah, and the menorah has to be lit. So the Parshas HaMenorah was said before the Chanukas HaNesiim. And as always, Hakem Afurish in Mesechtes Gittin, Daf Samach, Reb Levi says that Shmoine Parshiyos Nemru B'Yom Shehukam Bo HaMishkan, Eluheim, and one of them is the Parshas HaNeiros. As Rashi says, so they started lighting the menorah on Rosh Chodesh. So it's really written out of place because it should be written before the Chanukas HaNesiim and not after the Chanukas HaNesiim. That's the question of Lama Nismacha. It should have already said before the Chanukas HaNesiim. So what's the answer? The answer is that it's put out of place because when the Rebbeinu Shalom saw that Aaron felt bad, that he wasn't mishtatif in the Chanukas HaNesiim, he was menachem him with the Adlokas HaNeres. But that explains, I mean, how could that be? The Parsha of the Menorah, we just said, was said to Aaron before the Chanukas HaNesiim and not after. So if it was said to him before the Chanukas HaNesiim, how could it be coming as a nechama for not being mishtatif in the Chanukas HaNesiim? So it must be that this was a Nedava. They came to Moshe Rabbeinu that they want to be Menadev. And Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't sure. And then the Rebbeinu Shalom said to him, Kach me'itom, as Chazal say, that the Rebbeinu Shalom approved of this Nedava. Now, Weiss does that only those that originally wanted to bring this Nedava, about them, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu, Kach me'itom. As soon as Aaron on Rosh Chodesh Nisan wasn't part of this effort to bring this Nedava, so after the Rebbeinu Shalom accepted it, Kach Me'itom, he no longer was able to join because it was only for those that originally wanted to bring this Nedava. So he already felt bad on Rosh Chodesh Nisan because he was out of this project. And therefore, the Rebbeinu Shalom was menachem him with the Hadlokas HaNeiros, that shel chog gdoila mishalahem. But lefi zeh, I mean, kommt doch aus that the parsha of the menorah was said to him on Rosh Chodesh Nisan as soon as he fell out of being able to bring the korbanos nedava, and it was Kol Shos Daitei. The Rebbeinu Shalom told him the parsha, which would have anyway had to be said on this day. But the Torah writes it over here that we should understand that the Rebbeinu Shalom used this parsha as a nechama to Aaron HaKohen for not being part of the Chanukas HaNesiyim. Therefore, the Torah places this parsha after the actual Chanukas HaNesiyim. It was said then, it's written over here, that we should understand that the Rebbeinu Shalom said it to him then as a nechama because he already then was not able to participate. But if the Torah would have written it there, we wouldn't have understood that there's a connection between the Chanukas HaNesiyim and the Hadlokas HaMenorah. Only by putting it out of place do we have the ability to learn this. Okay? Azay Muzmalan and Pashut Pshat and Rashi. But now the question is, if the Rebbeinu Shalom would have said it to him, the Parsha of the Menorah, before he felt bad, he would have never felt bad. And since the truth is that Sholcho G'dolim Shalahem, that he's destined for greatness far beyond what the other Shvatim are, so the Rebbeinu Shalom should have told it to him immediately, and he shouldn't have to be Chol Shos Daitei, and then he should be Menachem him. He should have told it to him, he should have prevented the Chol Shos Daitei in the first place. So it must be that it's only through the setback of Chol Shos Daitei that Aaron becomes Ra'ui to the L'cho G'dola Mishelohen. If he needed to go through the experience, the setback, the Chalisha Sadas of Sheloi Hoya Hu V'Shiftoi B'chlal, the Chanukas HaNesiyim, in order to come to the Shulchan G'dolim Shalahem. And why was Aaron really not mishtatif in the Chanukas HaNesiyim? I mean, he felt bad, so he wasn't sure that it was the right thing, obviously. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know if he should accept it. Aaron, we see that he was boish, and he was hesitant to be miskarev in Parshas Tzav, even though it was a chiyuv. But because of his what he did with the egel, he was boish v'yorei mila hiskarev. So therefore, Aaron really didn't have the courage to be misnadev. And Memela he fell out. And after he saw that the Rebbeinu Shalom accepted the korbanos, and the Rebbeinu Shalom said, Kach me'itom, he felt bad. And it's because he fell out and he felt bad that he was zoiche to the Sholcha G'dola Mishelohen. You know, the Ramban really asks why punkt the menorah is the Sholcha G'dola Mishelohen. Aaron does many things that only Aaron does, the Ketores, etc. But it seems like the nechama really is like nichamti ki asisim. Nechama is a lotion of charota. In other words, in nechama, we find out that the bad was really for the good. That's the real meaning of nechama. And Ketores and other things Aaron could have done without the chalisha sadas. Therefore, it's not a nechama. But the atom madlik umetiv esaneros is something that required the chalisha sadas, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu is menachem him specifically with adlokas hamenorah, because that is something that he's zeicher to only through chalisha sadas. Just like we see that the Ner Chanukah comes, hibarim biyat chaloshim. Being chaloshim is actually the way we get to the Ner Chanukah. And who I didn't over here, but what is that about? Because you know that it's Yodua from the Arizal that the Malbim brings in the name of the Zohar. It's in the Zohar in the Hashmotas on Chumash Bereshis that when it says in the Torah Vayas Kain Aharon, what's the Kain? The Kain is because by all the creations of Maaseh Bereshis, it says, Vayomer Elokim Yehi, and then Vayihi Chen. So it was. But by the Or, it doesn't say Vayihi Chen. It says Yehi Or, Vayihi Or. Why? That's because it wasn't Cain. Because the Or, the original Or is Gonzoi HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Tzadikim Lasid Lavai. Rosh Ein Ha'olam Kedai L'Hishtamesh Boy. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Goinez the Or. So Mamela, there was no Cain in the creation of Or. As we say, Or Oilam Ba'oitzar Chaim. Oirois Me Oifel Omar Vayehi. I mean, we say, those of us that say, it's in the Yoitzer, but what does it mean that the Or Oilam is Ba'oitzar Chaim? What we have is the relative Or. Oirois Me Oifel. That's the Omar Vayehi. The Vayehi is only the Oirois Me Oifel, but not the Or Oilam. The Or Oilam is the Or Agonos. So the Or Agonos, really the only way. So the Zohar is saying that in the menorah, there was somehow an expression of the Or Hagonus. And since in the menorah there's somehow an expression of the Or Hagonus, Memela, by lighting the menorah, Aaron restored the Cain of the Brias Ha'or. In other words, it doesn't say Cain in the Brias Ha'or, but Vayas Cain Aharon. Aaron made the Cain because he brought out that original Or Hagonus. In any case, if we're talking about the Or Hagonus, which is really Gonus, as if it's a state in Chazal in Torah Shebal Peh, and the Or HaMenorah is the Or of Torah Shebal Peh. The Or represents the Torah Shebechsav. The menorah represents the Torah Shebal Peh. Horoitza lahachkim yadrim v'simnech menorah bedoran. That Or is really an Or that we only access through the b'machshakim hoishivani zu talmudo shel Bovel. That Or we only access through darkness, as the Midrash Tanchuma dashens the pasuk in Parshas, the Midrash Tanchuma in Parshas Noach dashens the pasuk, Ha'om ha'holchim b'choshech heima ro or godel. So it's the darkness, it's the setback, it's the chalisha sadas, it's the broken heart, it's the broken spirit. That's what opens us up for the Or Hagonus of Torah Shebal Peh. Just like you know that in the Hagdama of the Sefer Or Zarua, it says that he named the Sefer Or Zarua based on a dream that he had, that where he was told that the Seifei Tevis of Or Zarua Latzadik U'Yishrei Leiv Simcha is Akiva. And that's why he says you have to write Akiva with a Hey and not with an Aleph, because the Seifei Tevis of Akiva is Zarua Latzadik U'Yishrei Leiv Simcha. Kum Tochois, that, and with Rabbi Akiva we know, Kulu Alibid Rabbi Akiva. All Brises and Toseftas and Sefri and Sefra, it goes according to him and to him and to him, but Kulu Alibid Rabbi Akiva. As I state in the Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Pei Daled maybe. So the thing is, what we're saying is that Rabbi Akiva, that's really Rabbi Akiva's life, if you think about it. I mean, for 40 years, I mean, he knew nothing. Then he finally went to learn, you know, that the Yerushalmi says in the 6th parak in Psachim, that he sat by Rebbe Lezer for 13 years, v'loi hoyo mashgiach boy. He didn't take note. He didn't even notice him. I mean, today, somebody, about Shuv, is 40 years old, he comes to learn, everybody pats him on the back and he give him encouragement. I mean, v'loi hoyo mashgiach boy. And then it says that when he finally asked a certain question, and that appears in the first Mishnah over there in the 6th parak in Psachim. So Rabbi Yeshua said to the Rebbe Lezer, he said, "Zeho am asher lochamto asher ma'asta boy, kum hi lochem boy." In other words, so he didn't get much positive attention from Rebbe Lezer. Then finally, he worked his way up. Finally, he had, 24,000 Talmidim. They all died. Everything he did fell apart. No, and then he bounced back. So Torah Sheba'al Peh is all about the rising from the pain, and that's how one can access the Or Hagonuz, which is the Or Zarua Latzadik. You know, Zarua Latzadik is a very interesting lashon. Zarua Latzadik. But it could be b'derech remez. You know that there's an arichis in the Megala Amukos that the first. I'll tell you what it says there. The Megala Amukos. The Megala Amukos says in Oifen Ayin Dalid. He says that the ois pei is moira al pesach dvarecho yoyer. Pei. And he says, Loi zochar David b'tzmanya api, or in the Mizmor Kuf Yotes of Tilim, David did not mention or, rak b'ois pei. V'lachein mitchilas bereishis yesh pei oisius, ad milas yehi or. Upei talmidim hoyu loy lehillel, k'moy Moshe shehoya ben pei ba'amdei l'fnei parei, v'hu soy Torah sheba'al peh. Ramaz loy, l'Moshe hu yeh l'chol peh. So you see, since the Or Hagonuz is the Or of Torah Sheba'al Peh, so it's Zarua Latzadik. It's the ois that's beneath the tzaddik. It's the ois of pei. The emes it says also in the Bamidbar Rabbah and the Shir Hashirim Rabbah on the pasuk Shishim Heima Melochos. Va'alom is saying Mitzvah Shishim Heima Melochos Shishim Mesechtes. So Shmoinim Pilakshim. Shmoinim Batei Midrashos Shehoyu BeYerushalayim Keneged Psacheha. Very strange lashon. There were 80 Batei Midrashim Yerushalayim, and they are Keneged the Psachim of Torah, the doors of Torah. What does that mean? So in the Likutim of the Oy of Yisrael from the Apterov, he says that the letters that open, that are Peseach, the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, are Begematria 80. Mei Mesai the Mem, Yetzias HaShabbos the Yod, the Ches of Chamesh Esrei Noshim, the Aleph of Arba Avos Nezikin, the Chof of Kol Asvachim, and the Aleph of Avos Atumah. So that's the Psachim of Torah Sheba'al Peh, also add up to 80. So it all has to do with the fact that this Torah is the Torah Sheba'al Peh, and it somehow connects with the Yos Pei, and Pei connects with Or, because in Torah Sheba'al Peh is Gonuz, the Or Hagonuz. In any case, Aaron HaKohen, who lights the menorah and is mayor from the Or Hagonuz, gets there only through the Chol Shas Daita, and that's why the Nechama Ta'aharon is Dafke Shel Chog Gdoila Mishilahen She'at Omad L'kum Meitav V'Saneres. But how did you get to the Gdoila Mishilahen? Because you fell out and you felt bad, and Memela you can access that Or Hagonuz. Okay, so that's I think going to suffice.